Hey there, this is Mike with Bear Trek Adventures. In today's video, it's been about a month since I completed the Long Trail, and I received some different emails asking for like a follow-up gear video. So this is kind of post-trail gear review type of video. I'm basically going to go through. I'm not going through everything that I took on the Long Trail, but I'm going to go through a lot of different pieces of gear, kind of like what went, what worked good, what didn't work so good. Go through some of the gear that I sent home at different points along the way. So I will dive right into it, and I'll do this video the same as how I did my initial gear video for the Long Trail, in that I'll break it up into different segments and then put the timestamps down below in the description for the different parts of the video. So the first set of gear that I'm going to start with is basically things that I sent home for one reason or another. When I started this trip out, my base weight was like roughly about 15 pounds. I think by the time I ended the trail, my base weight was about 13 pounds. So base weight being basically all the gear that I was carrying in my pack, minus food, water, and consumables. So I'll start off with really the first set of gear I sent home. So when I got to Johnson, which was about 50 miles in the trail, I sent home some different gear that I wasn't either wasn't using it, or just didn't see a need for carrying it. Starting out, actually for a good bit of the trip, it was unseasonably warm for the time of year. For at least those first 5 days, I think it was during the day, it was above 80 every day. And then at night, it was just extremely warm. So I took for my sleeping layer, I took this Patagonia Capilene. This is the hoodie version. This is usually what I'll sleep in this, and then paired with the Patagonia Capilene bottoms. I sent these home. I did not use these at all. Matter of fact, probably I'm gonna say within like the first 8 days or so, I probably only used my Enlightenment Equipment quilt, which I took a 30-degree quilt. I probably only used that one night. Most of the time I was just sleeping in a pair of rain shorts that I took, and this is a Mountain Hardwear lightweight hoodie that I usually hike in cooler temperatures. So I sent home my base layer, I sent home my hat, I had a light pair of gloves, light pair of like merino wool gloves. I sent those home. At some point in that first section, I had a pair of these Dirty Girl gaiters. I had ripped, these are new ones that I had purchased since I came home. I had ripped these going through the Devil's Gulch area. So I had, actually I think I may have thrown them out. Either that or put them in a hiker box. I believe I threw them out. So basically that was gear I no longer had on me. Also in Johnson, I sent home I sent these next few pieces of gear I sent home when I got to Waitsfield. So this is my Montbell ultralight umbrella. I used this, I think I used this once or twice, and what I found is on the Long Trail specifically, a lot of places that I needed to use this was in some really rugged terrain where I needed to use both hands or both trekking poles, and even strapping it to my chest, it just wasn't enough. Between that and honestly, we didn't get that much rain. We lucked out. It really didn't rain that much, but the times I would have used this, it just wasn't convenient. So I decided to send that home, and I probably won't use that on my upcoming trips. The other thing I sent home, if you watch my videos around I think it was on day 9 and day 10, going through the Camel's Hump section and Appalachian Gap section, which to me I felt was the 2 toughest days on the trip. And that's where I did encounter some rain and some wetness, and I fell 2 or 3 times really good. I broke basically both, I'll say I broke both set of trekking poles. So on one pole, this was my fault, I got the tip caught in between a rock and the tip just snapped off. That was one thing I broke. And then the other thing I wanted to show, which apparently I was going to send these back for warranty, but there's 3 sections to these poles. Apparently the section that broke on the one pole I lost somewhere, and I didn't realize it until I unpacked some of this stuff tonight. But on these poles, I don't know if you can tell, but there's like a gasket that holds on these locks. But there's like a rubber gasket there, and it must be glued on or something, and so the adhesive part of that, it came off. So that part of the trekking pole in the middle section, basically this lock on the middle section, it just wouldn't stay in place, so I couldn't use one of my poles. So anyway, in Waitsfield, or right before I got to Waitsfield, I contacted CNOC. I ordered a new set of trekking poles and had them overnighted, so I sent these back home. So those came home. I started out with this Hyperlite, I think it's called the Versa. It's basically the Hyperlite fanny pack, and starting out, I had, this runs all the way through, and I had it attached to the side of my pack. And I just found out I had more room in my pack. I did not have a need for this. It was just roughly an extra 2.5, 3 ounces, whatever it is. I just wasn't using it. So I sent that home. It was extra weight I didn't need. I think I sent that home in Johnson. This isn't the exact sit pad I had. The sit pad I was carrying, and I carried it up until Manchester. So by that point, I only had like 50 or 60 miles left on the trail. I actually had a 4-section one, so one more of these sections. I found I just wasn't using the sit pad enough. I hiked most of the day, and I would use it, when I did use it, I'd use it for my morning stretches to lean on with like my knees for some of my stretches. And sometimes I'd use it for breaks, but I just found that I really didn't need it. So that was like another 3 ounces or so that I dropped. And that's most of the gear that I sent home. There's going to be a few other odds and ends that I'll roll in with some of the other gear selections. So next up is the backpack. So I went through this. Oh, whoops. Forgot one piece of gear for stuff I sent home. If you saw my videos, my trail videos, I started out filming with the GoPro Hero 9. Around day 9, going over at Camel's Hump, I lost a lot of footage. I had the GoPro corrupted my video card, or my memory card, and I could not get any of the footage off my GoPro for that day. So whatever footage I captured was from my iPhone. So yeah, I sent this home that went home in Waitsfield, and I don't know that I will be going back to the GoPro. I think I'm going to be researching, trying to find some other camera to use. In the meantime, for my trips, I'll be using my iPhone, and I might take the camera that I'm filming this on. It's the Canon, I think it's the M6 Mark II, I believe. Okay, now for the backpack. So I went over this in my initial gear video. I guess what I'd mentioned for this pack, I really like these Hyperlite packs. This is the Hyperlite Junction 2400. Overall, this pack has worked great. I couldn't even tell you how many miles I have on this. I mean, I carried this for the entire Long Trail, and basically the trips that I've done over the past year and a half, close to 2 years, actually yeah, about a year and a half. I've used this pack for. Man, I probably got close to 800 miles on this pack, or somewhere around there. Overall, I really like this pack. It carries the weight well. At one point in the beginning, I was carrying up to about 38, 39 pounds with some of the long water carries. And if you want more information on this, check out my initial video. I think I talk more about this, but there's a couple things that I don't like about the pack. Actually, the primary one being is the hip belt. I do not use the hip belt. I barely use the pockets, and when I fasten this together, I just leave it loosely around my waist. You know, the hip belts, they're designed to kind of take off some of the load from your shoulders. But yeah, I just don't like using the hip belt. So I've actually got another order that I placed for Superior Wilderness Designs, their 35-liter pack, which probably won't come in until about December because there's a big back order on them, and I ordered some custom options on it. But that's my new pack. Once it comes in, I'll be testing it. And if you caught my last trail video of Owl's Head, I put a little teaser in there that I'll be hiking the Appalachian Trail next year. So I'm expecting that I'll be taking that Superior Wilderness Designs pack. But other than the hip belt, I mean, everything else works great on this pack. I did not get any water inside it. Overall, I'd highly recommend it. I really wanted something with no hip belt. The other thing that worked well is I have these Hyperlight pod sacks. And so on the long trail and most of my trips, I'll take 2 of these. I use, and this is the large size. They have a small size and large size. This is the large size. I usually keep one for my sleep system, so I'll put my quilt in there. Mainly my quilt. Sometimes I'll add in my puffy jacket if there's room, depending on which quilt I'm taking. If I'm taking my down booties, I'll throw that in there. And so I use one for basically my sleep system, and then I use a second one for all my extra clothes that I have in my pack, as well as my electronics. So the one change that I am making, and it's not because this didn't work, it works great. But now that I know I'm going to be hiking the Appalachian Trail next year, when I came home from the Long Trail, I really evaluated all my gear, and I'm evaluating things to see where I can cut some extra weight that's unnecessary. So the one change I'm making is, this is a Z-Packs. It's their large stuff sack. It's a pretty good size. So I'll be using this to keep my quilt in, my puffy jacket, my pillow, anything that's related to my sleep system I'll keep in here. And then this is a Z-Packs medium stuff sack. I'm going to be using this to keep all my extra clothes in and my electronics. Now these are not waterproof, but I do use a pack liner. It's a Nilo Pro pack liner, and they work great. But by switching out my pack organization system to these lighter weight stuff sacks, it saves me a couple ounces. So that is one gear change I'm going to be looking to make. So that's basically my backpack. So overall, that system, it worked really good for me. Didn't have any issues with it. My next set of gear is my cook system. So I'd mentioned this a couple times in my trail videos, but this was part of some of the gear I also sent home. So I sent this home so first of all, this is what I started out with. So it's a Vargobot 700. So it's the 700 milliliter pot, and it has a sealable lid on it. I was so happy I took this pot. And I did carry this the entire time on the trip. But once I left, actually before I even got to Johnson, I started cold soaking my meals. I think it was on night of day 3, I believe, was the first time I cold soaked one of my meals. And then so when I got to Johnson, I sent home my BRS, my BRS 3000 stove, and I had a small canister that I only had a couple burns on, and I left that in a hiker box at the bed and breakfast I stayed at. So those pieces of gear went home. That was around mile 50, and I did not regret that decision at all. From there on out, I cold soaked all of my dinners, and sometimes breakfast if I basically eating oatmeal, just eat it cold. But basically what I would do is I would just, when it was about 2 or 3 hours before I'd get to camp, I would take whatever I had for dinner, I'd throw it in my pot, you know, add about 300-400 milliliters of water, somewhere around there, stir it up, you know, hike for an hour, stir it up again. And that worked great, and I absolutely love cold soaking. And so I plan to continue to do that going forward. I just like the convenience of it, and I personally don't mind eating cold food. So with that in mind, the one new piece of gear that I picked up, and I put a little Bear Trek Adventure sticker on it, is this. It's just a plastic container with, it also has a seal on it. Basically same concept. I'll just throw my dinners or, you know, food in here that I need to rehydrate. And I really like the Nor rice size. They work great in here. I've tried a lot of the different backpacker meals, like Mountain House meals. They work great in here. I've tried a bunch of different things so far, but just switching out to this plastic container, this saves me roughly about 4 ounces of weight. So this is what I plan to do on the Appalachian Trail as well. I am considering taking a lightweight stove setup on the AT just to warm up some hot tea or hot chocolate, something like that, but it's going to be an ultralight setup. And it won't be a canister stove. I might try out an alcohol stove or something. So that's basically my cook setup and what kind of changes I made there. But overall, that, you know, the Vargobot, I mean, these things are great. It's just, I think they work best if you're doing like a mix of cooking and cold soaking. All right, so my sleep system, and I'll throw up a video. I'll put my video in here. I did a video before I headed out on the long trail, just showing the tent and basically the sleeping pad. So I took this is my Z-Packs Altiplex tent. This tent worked great. So on the long trail, I went back through and I looked to see how many nights I slept in this. On the long trail, I was out there for 25 days. I slept in this 9 days. So the long trail plus some of the other trips I've done, I've probably spent about 20 to 25 nights in this. Overall, this tent works really good. I like how small it is, how small it packs down. Up until I hit the long trail, I never had an issue with condensation in this tent, and that's camping out in temperatures ranging anywhere from 20 to 22 degrees being the coldest, up to about 70 degrees being the warmest. And prior to the long trail, I never had condensation issues. Well, what happened for me on the long trail was one night it was raining really good, and so normally I will pitch this tent with my trekking pole at 145 centimeters. But that night that it rained, I was getting a lot of splash coming inside my tent that got the bottom, like the foot box area of my quilt, a little wet. So from there on out, I started pitching the tent lower, around 135 centimeters. So what I found out was when I pitched the tent lower at 135 centimeters, it doesn't get as much airflow coming in, and then I start to have condensation issues. So on my next trip I do with this tent, I will probably, I think maybe 140 centimeters might be the sweet spot between preventing splash up when it's raining, as well as helping to keep the condensation down. So that's one change I'm going to make with this guy. And I also want to try out a tarp setup. So I may I may get a tarp set up and try that out. The other change I made to this setup, I did not take this on the Long Trail, but this is the footprint for the Altiplex tent. This weighs, I think it's about 2.6 ounces. I decided not to take it on the Long Trail, but I found that, you know, when you're setting up in wet and muddy conditions and all that gets on the bottom of your tent, when you go to pack up your tent, all that, the wetness and the mud, it works its way on the inside of the tent. So from now on, I'll be taking the ground sheet just to try and keep the main tent a little bit cleaner and to try and cut down on some of the moisture that gets inside the tent, which is kind of hard to dry out once you're out on trail. And then my sleeping pad, I had the Thermarest X-Lite pad. This thing worked great. In the beginning, I probably could have used an Uberlite because it was so warm out, but overall, this pad worked great. I definitely will be taking that on the AT. In the colder temperatures on the AT, I'll be starting in March. I've purchased a X-Therm for those colder months, so I'll be testing that out this winter. So overall, that was basically my sleep system, and that clip I rolled, you saw the quilt. So I will say that I took the Enlightened Equipment 30-degree quilt. I definitely could have had a 40-degree, possibly even a 50-degree, and probably would have been fine. I would say most nights the 30-degree was overkill, and it was more than what I needed. But I was glad I had it. Just there was 1 or 2 nights that it got down into the low to mid 30s, so for that reason I was glad I had it. Electronics. So specifically, I was asked about my electronics and what worked well for me, what didn't work well, and how long did my battery pack last me for. So this was one area I was really surprised with. So I have this, it's the Anchor, I think it's the Power Core Essential 20,000 milliamp battery pack. This thing surprised the heck out of me. By my estimates, I estimated I was only going to be able to get about 4 days out of this at the very most. What I found was the longest I was out on trail was like 5.5 days. And even after being out there for 5.5 days with this battery bank, and I carried a lot of electronics, basically I had my cell phone. In the beginning, I had my GoPro, I had my Garmin InReach Mini, I had my Garmin Fenix 6S watch, and then I also have a set of earbuds. All that stuff I needed to charge. So for 5.5 days, this was great, and I still had about 30% of the battery left after 5.5 days. So I could probably get, my guess is I could probably get about 6 to 6.5, maybe even 7 days out of this battery bank. So that was great. So I mentioned the Garmin Fenix 6S watch. This worked well. I tracked every day I was out hiking. I would use it for tracking as far as to keep track of my mileage. I would get about 3 days out of the battery on this guy before I needed to recharge it. So I'd never had one issue with this, and it worked great. My Garmin InReach Mini, this was always strapped to my left, I think it's my left shoulder. This worked great, especially in the north. There's barely any cell phone reception, and I like to check in with my wife a couple times, at least throughout the day. So when I didn't have cell phone reception, I was able to contact her on my Garmin InReach. Yeah, so this, I didn't have any issues with this. Again, I got about 3 days out of this before I had to charge it. There were times when I was worried that I wasn't going to have enough battery power. I would just get like freaked out about that a little bit, especially with editing videos out on trail. So sometimes I'd put it, I think it's called the Explorer mode or extended mode. And basically the extended mode, what it does, it helps conserve your battery life. And basically I had it set to send a track point every 1 minute. So basically every couple hours. I think it's every 2 hours it sent a track point. So what it would do is every 2 hours it would turn on, it would send a track point, and then it would shut itself off. So that extended mode really helps conserve the battery on that. It also shuts off the Bluetooth, so if you need to send a message, you gotta turn that off to use your phone to send a message. The one thing I'm changing up, so I have, I think this is a 65 watt or 65 amp charger. I found out that, and I didn't realize this before I head out, but this is overkill for my battery bank. My battery bank, the most juice that it can take on the input is, it's like 18 watt, I believe. So this guy, I think this is a little over 4 ounces just for this. This is the Anchor 18 watt charger. So I swapped out to 2 of these. Initially I took the 65 watt one and this 18 watt one. So from now on I'm leaving this guy at home, and then I will take 2 of these guys, and that basically saves me another couple ounces there. Yeah, and that's pretty much all of my electronics. And then in addition to that, for navigation, I primarily used gut hooks for navigation. Gut hooks is great for some of these long distance trails where you can track, it tracks your course, so you can tell if you're, on course or not. So you use it for navigation. It also tells you where the water sources are, where camps are at. It tells you about, the amenities that are available in each trail town. So overall, gut hooks worked great on this trip. All right, next up is some of the clothes I took on the trip. So I'll start off with like foot gear. So the Ninja 5-toe socks, I primarily hiked in these. Well, pretty much every day I hiked in these. And so I like these because they really help with blister prevention, because each toe is kind of covered in material. So between using these and my combination of the beard butter and Badger foot balm, putting that on my feet at night, combination of those two things, I did not get any blisters at all. And then I took 2 pairs of the darn tough quarter cushion socks. I found having a total of 3 socks was too much, because I always had 1 clean pair because I only slept in 1 pair of these. So from now on I'll probably just take 2 pairs of socks, and that should be more than enough. And then my Z-Pack rain shorts. So initially these were the Z-Pack Virtus rain pants, and I cut them off into shorts. I found that when cutting them into shorts, this material is so light that the shorts would just kind of ride up my legs. I don't know if I cut them too short or if the material is just too lightweight to make some good shorts out of, but so they didn't work too well to hike in. But I did sleep in these every single night while I was on trail, and I'd also use them as I'd wear them in town too, like when I'd get to town. So for 1.5 ounces, these work great, and I'll probably continue to take those. Some of my rain gear. So this is the Montbell Versalite rain jacket. I would say for the most part this rain jacket works really good. I've used this thing a lot, not just on the long trail, but on other hikes as well. But the one thing, and pretty much any rain jacket, when it's hot out, when it's hot and humid, you're gonna sweat out in it. I don't care what rain jacket it is. So I did sweat out in it when I used it, but with temperatures, I used it in temps anywhere from 50 degrees up to about 70. So for that reason, it was, you know, a lot of times I used it, it was too warm. But the one thing I noticed with this is a size medium, which I typically will take a size medium. The back length on it is too short, so I'd have to constantly just pull it down over my back because it kept on riding up no matter how tight I made the cinch around my waist. So the one thing I did is I ordered the same jacket in a size large, and the size large, just because it's more material, it's bigger, it goes further down my legs. So far I've been testing that out on some day hikes, and just having it in that bigger size I think is going to make a big difference for me. Now the rain pants. These are the Mountain Hardwear. I think they're the Pack Light Plus Gore-Tex pants. These work really good, but I found that a lot of days where I needed to wear them, there was so much mud and so much water on the trail that the bottom part of the pant legs were just going to be completely muddy. Just a muddy mess by the time I got to camp. So a lot of times in the rain I would just hike in my shorts. I just did pick up one of the Z-Packs rain kilts. So I'm going to be testing that out for warmer temps. I'll probably keep wearing these in like colder temperatures, but for warmer temps I'm going to be testing out a rain kilt. So I'll see how that goes. Alright, so that's my rain gear. Water filtration. So for a little bit of context on this one, I've hiked roughly about 1,600 miles in the past 2 years, and I only say that because up until I hit the Long Trail, the only water filter I really used was the Katadyn Be-Free water filter. Now this is the tactical version, which is very hard to find. Usually you can only find them in Europe, but it's made out of a little bit tougher material for the water bladder part. So my experience using this water bladder, which I ran into issues on the Long Trail, was that usually when I hit the first like really dirty water source, like if I'm getting water from a pond or something like that, or it's just a really dirty water source, this thing clogs up. And there is no easy way to back flush these water filters. So by day 3 or 4, the flow rate on this thing slowed down so much. I mean, it was probably, the flow rate was probably like maybe 20% of what it was when I started. So I picked up Sawyer Squeeze and started using the Smart Water Bottle, just attaching the Sawyer Squeeze to that. I picked this up, where was it? In Rutland, I picked one of these up. And this combination works really good. The issue I had with this was I was putting, when I got my first one, because I went through 2 of these, when I got my first one, I was putting my electrolytes in my water bottle and filtering that without thinking. And by trying to filter out the electrolytes with all the salt, it clogged up the filter to the point even back flushing it didn't work. So I picked up a second one in Manchester. And so now I use this so on like the last 50 miles of the Long Trail, and I've used it, let's see, I've hiked probably about 75 miles since I got home on the Long Trail, and this thing works great. And I probably will not go back to the Katadyn Be-Free filter unless it's for day hikes. So that's definitely a good gear swap out for me. I like these, but this is more reliable, I should say. Okay, next up is shoes and footwear. These are my camp shoes. These are the Leadville Pacers. These are I'll call them a lightweight sandal. They weigh about 9.5 ounces, and I took these, I used them in town. I would use them around camp sometimes, but for me, I've kind of made the decision I'm going to stop carrying camp shoes just to save just to save on the weight. On my last trip, I did not take a pair. I didn't feel I needed them. I plan on starting out the Appalachian Trail with no camp shoes, just to try and save the weight and to get my base weight down. But if you want, I would recommend them if you want to carry camp shoes. These are a good option to go with. Now the shoes I wore. So I've been wearing the Ultra Lone Peak 5s this year. It's my second year using them. Last year I started out with the Lone Peak 4.5s. I was actually surprised how well the Lone Peaks 5 held up for me. This pair of shoes, so I wore them on the long trails, so roughly 300 miles there. I would say in total I probably got about 350 miles on this pair of shoes. There's still a lot of tread left on them, which is kind of surprising. The tread has worn really well. Now, instead of using the insoles that come with them, I swapped out to the Super Feet insoles. So this combination seems to work really well. My experience with the Lone Peaks is usually the midsole gives out on them first. I really don't know what they are on the 5s because I haven't noticed any kind of performance change with them. But with the Lone Peak 4.5s, after about 150 miles, the midsole started to give out on me. That's why I switched to the Super Feet. This was the pair of Super Feet soles that I've been using with these shoes. So two things. So on the insoles, so you notice the difference of these. So this is a brand new pair. There's like this, I don't know, it's some type of outer, I don't know, line fabric that goes on the outside. What happened, I think because it was so wet and muddy, the fabric completely worn off in the heel and basically down the middle part of the foot. It was all shredded. So I basically took that and I ripped it off, and so now it's just down to the rubber, which there's a little bit of sticky on there from the glue adhesive. But these still work fine. I mean, I'm still using them. They still work great. So that was kind of my you know, how these worked out. What I like about them is the bottom part. There's like this hard, I don't even know what kind of material it is, but it's not, I mean, they'll eventually wear down, but it's better support than what you get with the standard insole that comes with the Lone Peaks. As far as the shoes, I mean, the tread is still good. The one issue I had, which was kind of my fault, actually there was two things. One, with the Lone Peak 5s, they started sewing in this like toe box protector cover thing, but I found that did not make a difference. These things still ripped off, where you get this little flap, showing. A little annoying, but it doesn't really degrade the performance any. But what happened was, like I said, Camel's Hump and Appalachian Gap was the toughest section. I got stuck twice. Both feet were caught in between two rocks, and I was very careless pulling my feet out when they got stuck, and so I basically ripped a hole in the side of these, which so both the shoes have the same wear on them. They both have like this nice hole on the side there. So that is my kind of review, I guess, of the Lone Peaks. The only other thing that's left is the other thing that worked well for me, which I didn't think about that much when I took it, but when I got to Johnson, so I was only 50 miles in, I had a lot of swelling issues. And up until that point, I had only taken a couple Advil. Well, everyone at the hostel there, they're like, dude, you need to start just, you know, taking a bunch of Advil. There's one guy taking like 24 Advils a day, which that's a lot. But anyway, so I got my pack of meds here, mainly Advil in there. I was taking, I would say for like the first, you know, after I left Johnson, for about the week after leaving there, I would take a couple in the morning and then a couple at night. And that really helped with the swelling. The other thing, this is empty now, but amazingly, I was able to maintain my weight over the 25 days. Actually, by the time I got to Rutland, I had gained 6 pounds. And then by the time I ended the trail and got home, the day after I got home, I weighed myself. I'd gained a total of 1 pound for the trip. In this bottle, I normally keep, this is 8 ounces, I will keep olive oil. And so I would have like a couple ounces of olive oil each day just to add in the calories. But overall, that's kind of my gear, how things worked, how they didn't work. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below and I will try and answer any additional questions that you guys have. Thanks for checking this out. Stay tuned for more as I start to get ready for the Appalachian Trail and test out some gear and just overall get ready and look forward to doing some more hikes here. This is Mike with Bear Trek Adventures. I hope you have a good evening.